Hello and welcome to the Nevers Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the discussion and dissection of every episode of the upcoming HBO series The Nevers, an original sci-fi drama from writer, producer, god, Joss Whedon. I'm one of your hosts, Taheg, and joining me today is Gina.
Hello, everyone.
If you want to listen in, you can always find this podcast at hbothenevers.com, and feel free to stalk us on social media. We've got Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at hbothenevers. You can find this podcast on all the usual trouble spots: iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and pretty much anywhere else you can find podcasts, you'll be able to find us. So this week we've got some very interesting topics to discuss. We'll be starting off with an introduction to Joss's works and talking about our favourite creations of his. From then, we'll be moving on to our initial reactions of Joss's new show and the hopes and expectations from it. Then a particularly favourite topic of mine, the greater Whedonverse theory. That should be fun.
I'm excited.
From that, we'll be discussing directing duties. And then maybe, if there's time at the end, which there will be, listener-submitted letters. We've got a few more of them, and they're going to be cool. So, without further ado, let's move on to the first subject. Our introduction to Joss Whedon's works, and which we particularly love. Would you like to start us off, Gina?
Yes. Oh, man. I can talk about this for probably 12 hours straight, so I will limit myself to very briefly talking about my favorite Joss works, which is my favorite media anyway. So, Joss Whedon has done television, film, and comics. It's incredible how he's created his own original IP and own original worlds. It's even hard for one writer and creator to do even just one, let alone more than one great one. My personal favorite has to be Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Obviously, I'm a little biased because that's technically the first one I watched from him. And long story short, when my sister and I were in college, our best friend Josh, he told us, hey, have you guys ever seen Buffy the Vampire Slayer? And at that time, I had never watched a TV show, which is really weird to think about, but my parents never showed my sister and I television, which is really weird. So when he first told me that, I'm like, well, how long is it? And when Josh said, oh, it's 7 seasons, and there's a spin-off show called Angel, that's 5 seasons. And I was thinking, there is no way, like, this sounds cute, we'll try it, but there's no way I'm even gonna finish Buffy, let alone also watch Angel at the same time when we have to. And even the title sounds kind of weird, and especially since it's obviously the first television show I had ever watched, I was like, I mean, how could a whole show be about a slayer fighting vampires? And like, what kind of name is Buffy anyway? You know, the usual thoughts that people had about that title, which is the whole point of why Joss even called it that. But anyway, I remember watching the first episode, and even though sometimes it's cheesy, I just knew there was something special. First of all, it had a female lead, which, again, I hadn't watched any TV shows, but even I knew that was something special. And even at that time when I was in college, it was so many years after the show had aired at that point. So I was like, wow, so this is like really ahead of its time. I love the characters. Somehow you just fall in love with like Willow and Xander and Giles and even Cordelia. Like, she's hilarious. Like, it's just so good. And looking back at it now, because I'm also a writer and I've tried to study screenwriting and television writing, it's such a perfect 2-part pilot because it just sets everything up so well. Maybe on first watch, maybe it could seem a little like, okay, I kind of want to get to the point, like I kind of want to see where it's going, but on rewatch and in a lot of TV writing books, it analyzes how that pilot is structured. And again, I could talk about even just the pilot for 6 hours. So.
Yeah, like I say, the pilot for Buffy is an absolute masterclass in what a pilot episode should do. It just hits all the bases and it hits them so well. It doesn't surprise me that sort of future generations are studying it for its educational value.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I have a friend that's starting to get into TV writing, and he bought this book, and he's like, hey, look, I want to show you something. And it literally brings up Buffy. as the perfect pilot, and I love that. I always feel so validated when my friends, like, even if they haven't seen Buffy, they're like, "Oh, look, this book just mentioned Buffy." I'm like, "Haha, I told you, it's amazing." Like,
It's amazing the effect it had on modern day television. Like the structure and the language of Buffy, even though it's been almost exactly 20 years since it started, the effects are still felt to this very day. Like things like describing the main antagonist of a series as the big bad started with Buffy. The way they speak and the kind of the vaguely irreverent air that all his shows have, that's where it started. And if you look at kind of a lot of the modern Marvel stuff, it's so influenced by his work that, I mean, you can't deny his
yeah.
effect.
Oh, totally. It gets bad when I'm on Twitter. I am always polite, but when people say, like, "Oh, the Russo brothers, like, they totally get the Avengers the most," and like, "Oh, Joss, like, was too funny with the Avengers and that's why I don't like Thor Ragnarok," and then I get super heated. Always polite, but I always think back, like, honestly, without Joss Whedon, Marvel and the Marvel Cinematic Universe would not be where it's at today. And especially since after Phase 1, he also helped Kevin Feige and everyone sort of plot out what was going to happen in Phase 2. A lot of people don't know that. Like, he was a script doctor.
He really built the skeleton for what we know of the MCU.
Yeah. And he helped write scenes, even though I don't like this film at all, but he helped write scenes for Thor the Dark World when they needed emergency rewrites while they were filming. They literally flew him yeah, a punch up. They literally flew him in a helicopter on set and wrote a scene for Chris Hemsworth and Tom Hiddleston. He also helped with Captain America the Winter Soldier, which makes perfect sense to me. Because
such a good film.
Oh my God, probably honestly in the top 3 in my opinion. But I feel like Joss Whedon probably has a little bit to do with that. Like, no offense, but I feel like he definitely helped. So yeah.
Definitely. There's a few scenes that definitely got his stamp on them.
Exactly. And I personally think "I'm with you till the end of the line" is such a Joss Whedon line that, like, I highly doubt he'll ever take credit for it, but, like, he had to have written that. That's my theory.
I wouldn't be surprised if that was true, but it is also quite a Cap thing to say, so.
For sure. But it's such it's an amazing Cap line, but I feel like only Joss could come up with that, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, I get where you're coming from. My introduction to Joss was quite different because it was sort of almost by luck, because this was back in day when there were only 4 TV channels and no internet, so it was quite hard to spread word about amazing TV shows. And I was just kind of tapping through the channels one day, not that it took that long, and I saw kind of a pretty lady walking down an alleyway, and I was like, "Oh, this isn't going to end well." And then a vampire turns up. It's like, "Oh, this is definitely not going to end well," and it didn't. But in such a twist, it ended quite badly for the vampire, because it was Buffy who was there, and she did her usual thing and smacked the stuffing out of him. And I was like, "Oh, I wasn't expecting that. This is cool. Going to keep watching." And yeah, let's just say I instantly fell in love with the characters. They're all just so great. Like, there are very few bad characters in Buffy. Even the evil characters are still fantastic. You still have them. He's one of, in my opinion, the best writers of villains that has ever worked in television.
Yes.
Like, a villain can carry a show, and no one writes a villain quite like Joss Whedon.
And the thing is, like, I don't know why, but for me, villains are always my favorite part about things for some weird reason. I'm weird. I think watching The Lion King and, like, loving Scar just, like, influenced me. So sometimes when I watch movies before I watch Buffy, I was like, the villain was okay. And then the second I watch Buffy, even the Master, I was like, wow, like they care about the villain. The villain has scenes. You're starting to understand where he's coming from. I really like Darla as well. Like, and then obviously it just kept getting better and better from there when it came to villains. And don't get me started about season 2, because I could also talk about 5 days about season 2.
Spoik. Love a bit of Spoik. Although Drusilla's accent was quite painful at times.
It's funny because for me it's amazing, but I could obviously understand you have a different perspective on that.
But I've got to say, for me, love basically every TV show he's done. Buffy, Angel, Firefly, Serenity, Dollhouse, Dr. Horrible, all fantastic. But in my opinion, his most underrated work has to be Much Ado About Nothing.
Yes.
Shakespeare is such a hard medium to adapt. There's been so many god-awful Shakespearean movies. And for me, only two have absolutely nailed it. One was, of course, Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet.
Yep, love that.
Stupendous film. But on almost the complete opposite, that was this huge, gaudy, very modern, bright, flashy, singing songs, guns with swords names written on them, kind of spectacle. And then on the complete opposite end of the scale, you've got Joss creating Much Ado About Nothing. And it just looks like he's got some friends around to his house, set up a camera, and they're reading lines.
Yes.
It's got this amazing kind of relaxed feel to it. But everyone in it is fantastic because they're all Joss Whedon alumni, so of course they're fantastic.
Right.
But it so captures kind of the feel of a play, but it's on screen. You can watch it whenever you want. You don't have to go to to the Globe to see it. It's right there. It's a disc away.
I know. It's fascinating because I just showed Buffy and Angel for the first time to my friend Eve. We've been doing that the past 7 months, and we just finished. And she's a huge Shakespeare nut. So she had already seen Joss's Much Ado, and she was like, it's okay. And now she wants to rewatch it, and she's so excited because of Amy Acker and Alexis Denisof. And that's what I kind of told her. I'm like, look, I love Kenneth Branagh's Much Ado. That's obviously like the classical way of portraying it. However, I love modern adaptations of Shakespeare, and especially if you put it in the lens that like Joss literally did this when he was on break while he was doing the first Avengers. And he did it in 2 weeks, and it's in his house, and that's beyond incredible. I think if you just go into it thinking, okay, this is an indie production, modern day adaptation of Much Ado About Nothing, like you said, I think it's incredible. I think it's entertaining. Like you said, the actors are so great together, the energy, like you just want to keep watching. And it's so much fun to see when you do know about Joss Whedon's other works, to see all the alumni and how they're all acting together. And I love that Nathan Fillion is in it, even though he was terrified. Like he told Joss, like, I can't do Shakespeare. And Joss is like, well, I don't care. You're going to do it. I love that.
And like any good director marshalling his forces, Nathan Fillion thought he couldn't do Shakespeare, but he did. He nailed it because Joss had faith.
Again, as long as you go in with the proper expectations, like you said, it's not some grand spectacle. It's an indie production, but I love that it's also black and white as well. It's beautiful.
Combination of the cinematography is fantastic in the black and white tone, with the very classical dialogue, but in a modern setting. It's a very sort of heady cocktail, and it just worked. It so easily could have gone wrong. It could have come off as like bad community theatre.
Exactly.
But they just nailed it. It's just like this really clean, simple production, and it's all it needed. It's carried on the strength of the actors' performances.
Oh, now I want to rewatch it like right now. I just can't wait to see what he can come up with next, because it's really, like I said, it's really difficult to create your own original IP and original worlds, but if there's a person to do it, it is him.
I mean, yeah, he's already proven that this will be his third time creating a large scale universe, maybe fourth. He's done it many, many times.
Yeah. And
he's proven that he is the absolute master of it. So it'll be very interesting to see what he comes up with. I know after his somewhat acrimonious parting with the Red Company, whose name we won't mention because we've already said it about 5 times this podcast.
I'm still bitter about it, but...
Yeah, but we all are. I think he was wise to take a bit of a break, to relax and just kind of focus on getting his Joss back, get his Joss on.
Yes.
But while I understood he needed to do that, a part of me inside was like, yeah, but when are you going to make a new show? Like,
yeah,
your movies are great. We love your movies. Don't stop making the movies. But at the same time, make a show. Make a new show. Make it big. Make it Joss. Make it cool. And make it now. While I was a huge fan of his work on the Avengers, like, that's not his forte. I want to meet new characters that he's created that I know I'm going to end up loving. So, like, especially, and then when I heard the idea for his new show, it was like, Okay, this is a bit out there, but I think if anyone can do it, Joss can.
Again, both of us could also just talk about forever how much we love all of his work. So,
I mean, we didn't even touch on the holy grail that is Firefly, his
yes,
foreshadowed, or any of his sci-fi work, Dollhouse, which is a series I absolutely love. But one
exactly.
thing I will say about Dollhouse, actually, I nearly got into an argument with a good friend of mine the other day. We were talking about shows that we want brought back. And of course, everyone mentioned Firefly. I was like, you know what? Honestly, I think I would take a third season of Dollhouse over a second season of Firefly for one simple reason. I feel like Firefly, it wasn't the perfect ending with Serenity, but it got an ending. It also then got a couple of really, really amazing comics.
Yeah.
Like the Shepherd story, fantastic. Feels in books past, fantastic comic. And then you have Dollhouse, which had just literally limitless potential. And we saw a few glimpses of what he was planning for the future. I believe he'd pitched a 6-season arc, and we got a few glimpses of what he was planning for those later seasons, and it looked like it could have possibly been his best work. And then it got cancelled, and he was like, look, he made this 2-parter episode. It's kind of a mini movie. He took it to the network and was like, look, this is what I'm doing. This is my end game. Watch this, and then tell me I can't have 4 more seasons. And they watch it, and they're like, that was pretty amazing. You can have 1 season.
Mm.
Yeah, so the second season, while it covers the bare bones of what he wanted to do, it isn't quite as satisfying as I'm sure he wanted, and as the fans wanted, after being so invested. How much of the first season did you see?
I saw the first half, but I literally remember the cliffhanger, and it's killing me. I won't mention character names, but
Yeah,
it's basically
we're
when
saying spoilers.
Alan Tudyk shows up? Question mark.
Oh my god.
That's
Yeah,
literally where I left off, and I am dying because it's literally been 8 years. So
on it, like I don't mean to dial up your torment any further, but it's probably my favorite Alan Tudyk role. It is, the way it goes is just stunning.
it's literally killing me because I was so happy when that happened, and I don't know what happens.
Yeah, and the problem is the first season happens, and then there's a very, very dissatisfying second season, and then a kind of mini movie to wrap it all up. So it's a double feature-length episode, and it doesn't quite scratch the itch. I would really love to have like maybe a comic that could cover in the same way they did with Buffy and Angel, a comic that concludes the arc how he wanted it to be, or another series, or even just send me the script so I can read them. But yeah, I need to know how that world was meant to be, because it was just limitless potential.
Oh, see, now you're getting me to want to watch Dollhouse right
Sorry, I promise I'll stop eventually. I won't. I'm never going to stop until the world understands what we lost when we lost Dollhouse. I think as a show, it really highlighted how versatile Eliza Dushku is as an actress.
Yeah.
I mean, while she was great as Faith, and while Faith did have a bit of development in the later seasons, she was a bit not one note, because Joss doesn't do one note, but she had a very specific character to her. Whereas in Dollhouse, as it's every episode's basically a different character, and it just showed how amazingly versatile she is. I can only think of one actress in a TV show that has pulled off that kind of level of versatility or more, and that is Tatiana Maslany in Orphan Black.
I know everyone says that, and I really want to watch
It's
it.
absolutely worth watching as soon as possible.
Yeah, see how many things I have to watch and rewatch.
But we briefly touched on it earlier and then got distracted by Doll's House and Firefly. But our topic 2 of discussion today is our initial reactions on hearing about Joss's new show and our hopes and expectations for it. We've sort of covered this already, but do you want to go a bit deeper into that? Well,
Yes, I believe. I'm trying to remember what social media medium I found out about Joss's new show, but I freaked out. I retweeted everything I could about it. I believe I had a Facebook post like, oh my god, this is what I'm talking about. He's creating new characters. Like, I'm sure, like every single Joss Whedon fan, we've been wanting not only new characters, but a new TV show. Like, I'd be excited if he was creating a new movie, because duh, it's him. But the fact that it's a TV show, and then the fact that HBO was going to produce it is like, and then I think I was even excited before I found out what it was about. I think the headline probably just said like Joss Whedon. I forgot the headline, but something like to create a new TV show for HBO called The Nevers. So like Joss Whedon and HBO already. And I briefly mentioned it, I believe, in the last podcast. I'm not a Game of Thrones fan. I saw the first 2.5 seasons and it just personally wasn't for me, but I can definitely appreciate the amazing aspects about Game of Thrones. So again, when I heard Joss Whedon and HBO, that was it for me. Like, I don't care what it's about. And then I read what it's about in the article, and it's literally just putting everything I love together. Like, a female group, and they're gonna have supernatural powers, and it's in Victorian London. Like, I can't.
It's just
And I'm sure I'm not the only person that felt that way.
not at all. I imagine that all the kind of the Whedonites out there had very similar reaction. I know I had a very similar reaction. I saw a thing about him making a new TV show, and my hype already was just at 10, knowing that he was making anything new. I don't care what it's about, who, where, why, just all I care about is it was happening. I was like, yay! And then I saw it was for HBO, and it was like, why have I never? That's the perfect pairing. Like, that would be brilliant. And then I read the description for it, and I was like, okay, that sounds like a very Joss thing to do. And I'm quite glad that now we're getting a new TV show for the first time in so many years, and it really feels like he's going back to his roots. And I think that's very much what he needed to do after his work with the Red Ones, and kind of after having a couple of series that maybe didn't pan out quite the way he wanted them to just return to what made him this shiny golden god in the first place. I think it's a very, very clever move. And then to do it on a network which has shown, as we covered last episode when we were talking about whether HBO is the right network, I think to be working with a network that have shown in the past that they're willing to take these kind of leaps of faith, I think it was all very, very well done. I'm very excited to see where this goes.
I'm very lucky. I go to San Diego Comic-Con every single year. I have for the past probably 8 years. Sorry. And and I've always gone every time he has a panel, I have to go and I camp out. And I've met him a few times at Comic-Con, whatever. Anyway, the point is he was going to create a comic book called Twist, and it was going to take place in Victorian London, and it was going to have a female protagonist. And I was really excited about that because it was a comic book and it sounded great. And then the next year, I think that's when he announced his Dr. Horrible comics, which I haven't read, which, again, I'm being a bad fan. Again, he always excited about new projects, but he still seemed a little sad. So I'm so excited that he's creating a new TV show because I hope this will show this modern society how great he can actually be, because with all the complications of Age of Ultron, and I think when people even think about the first Avengers, they don't think, oh, that's Joss Whedon at his best. They think, oh, look, it's such a great Marvel movie, which is interesting. So I feel like The Nevers is finally, for the people that haven't, unfortunately, for the people that haven't watched Buffy or Angel or Firefly or Dollhouse or any of his works, because the Whedonverse, or the Whedon fandom is huge, but we're still kind of like, in a weird way, like a niche group. So I think this is finally, ironically, going to push him into the mainstream when it comes to just fandom and people in general that haven't seen his TV shows and don't think about him when they think about the first two Avengers films.
I think that's a very good point. I think it's been 20 years since Buffy, and he's had a lot of, and I think if Firefly has shown us anything, it's that Joss is very, very popular with in general terms, fairly small crowd. His work is always really well loved, but it doesn't have a lot of mass appeal. And I think while his work with the Avengers did have huge appeal, it was still him working with, it wasn't really his work, which is why I think a lot of people don't immediately associate those films with him, and why his name has somewhat fallen off of late. But I think that's actually a good thing, because then when The Nevers comes out to HBO, who is a network that are on fire at the moment, a lot of people will go in with no expectations. They won't be going in thinking, yes, this is the new Joss, it's going to be the best thing ever, or we'll trash it on Twitter. They'll go in thinking, oh, a new show, looks quite fancy, I'll hit play and see what happens. And they'll go in with an open mind, which is the best you can hope for when
That
you're
is so
starting
true.
a new world.
Because then not only will they be blown away and they won't expect it, then they're going to be able to just go watch all of his stuff for the first time. And that is very, I'm very jealous as well.
I think Joss was in a very similar position, although probably a few rungs up the ladder compared to someone like James Gunn, who'd made a few films, but they were all quite niche. They were very popular with a small crowd. I think Joss was in a similar position where he had a few shows that were insanely popular, but had never really broken into kind of wider acclaim. So fingers crossed he can finally push in this time and become what he deserves to be, which is a household name. I think one of the things that's so amazing about Joss's work, and it actually leads quite well into topic 3, is the connectivity of it all. Not just the obvious connections like Buffy and Angel, but if you probe a little deeper, and if you are willing to make a few connections in your mind, maybe you're a little shaky, there is a theory out there. It's known as the greater Whedonverse theory. It's one of my favourite theories. I'm a bit of a sucker for a conspiracy theory, and the greater Whedonverse theory is one of my favourite. So get your tinfoil ready, because this is going to get a bit weird.
I know, I'm excited because I know really like little to nothing about this Whedonverse theory, so I'm ready.
Basically, I'm not going to go full tinfoil hat, 6 hours deep in the darkness with my torch, because I don't think anyone really wants to hear that. But what I'm going to do is I'll give you a basic outline of the skeleton, and we can build more meat onto it as we progress. The basic theory holds this. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, spoiler warning for a 20-year-old show, ends with Buffy empowering all the potentials to become Slayers. It's awesome. She then, if you read the comics, fucks off to Scotland and hides there. And it's great, but at this point, the Watchers Council were like, okay, we are the Watchers, we guard the Slayers. And there aren't any. They're all in Scotland, and they're not talking to us because we've been dicks to them for 7 years. So they start planning for eventualities. They then run into the remains of the Initiative, who we all remember were the science techie soldier morons from before. It then gets a bit strange, because we then jump across to Angel. And in Angel, that series finishes far too soon, with the Black Thorn being broken and the senior partners of Wolfram and Hart coming down to Earth. Now, the Whedonverse theory holds that the Watchers Council teamed up with the Initiative and found a way to seal the senior partners away. There was one problem. Every few years, a sacrifice had to be made. That sacrifice had to be done in a very particular, almost ritualistic fashion, because, I mean, it's a sacrifice, they're always ritualistic. That led into the Cabin in the Woods. The belief is that the shadowy company that runs the Cabin in the Woods is actually run by the remnants of the Watchers Council and the Initiative. They seal everything away in an attempt to essentially no longer need Slayers, because now they don't have any. This all goes really well for about 10 years, and then a stoner and his sort of, they kind of implied they'd hooked up at the end, but they sort of didn't. And, you know, the virgin sacrifice, who isn't a virgin, basically decides, you know what, sod this planet, I'm done. There's no sacrifice, and the last thing we see in that film, again, spoiler warning, a huge claw of the senior partners bursting out of the floor. Earth is destroyed, no longer livable. So what do? We head to space! The remnants of the Watchers Council, the Initiative, and now the senior partners in Wolfram and Hart, they form an alliance. Why does that name seem familiar? Oh, that's right! That connects to Firefly. It gets funny. It gets better. So the alliance takes over. There's a war. It doesn't end well if you're wearing a brown coat. But new universes brings new problems. And they're like, you know what else really great at problems? Slayers. So they search for ladies with increased abilities. But being as they are the Initiative and the Watchers Council, and they're all kind of tools, they're like, well, what if we do a bit of testing on them just to see if they're the right ones? And that's how we end up with River. That is the bare bones of the theory. But I think you'll agree that it
Yeah.
holds a certain amount of
Yeah,
weight.
I love that.
It's brilliant, isn't it? It's so crazy. But it all sort of has an internal logic that does kind of work. It gets even better because you can add in things like Dollhouse, because the houses in the system, the mental conditioning they use is their attempts to turn humans into kind of quasi slayers. When that fails, because spoilers, because you haven't seen the series, like that goes off the rails, so they have to try something else, and that leads to River. And then even it's not technically a Joss Whedon show, but the showrunner's surname is Whedon, so we'll allow it. And they've now said that from season 6 onwards, it's in its own universe. It's not part of the MCU continuity. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. There is talk that even including their shattered version of S.H.I.E.L.D., molding that, because the latest season of that deals with the Earth being destroyed, which could well have been by the senior partners. They kind of mold all that and molds the remnants of S.H.I.E.L.D. into the Alliance. Yeah, like it's the problem is with a name like the Alliance with no real kind of fleshing out of it, you can really add whoever you want into that, and it still holds true. I mean, you could say the Mister Men join, and it
Right.
works.
Do you know when this theory started? Was it after Cabin in the Woods came out?
I believe it was Cabin in the Woods was the linchpin which connected it all.
Okay.
Before that, we were just like, what if something happened at the end of Buffy, and that's what happened to Firefly? And then Cabin in the Woods came out, and like, oh, that's what happened after Buffy that connects it to Firefly.
Right.
We have a theory. I believe it first emerged like it was 2015-ish, but I think it may have been before that, kind of late 2013, early 2014 was the first real kind of emergence.
Yeah, because people that potentially thought that there was a link between Buffy and Angel and Firefly, I could just imagine them watching Cabin in the Woods in theaters, like, "Oh my god,
Christmas.
I found it!" Like,
the question then becomes, if we accept that theory as a thing, if we believe that, where do we think the Nevers is going to fit in that timeline? And like, what effects do we think the events of the Nevers will possibly have on that greater shared universe?
yeah, I love that. And actually, I'm gonna bring this up, and I might have bring it up before, but I just remembered in Age of Ultron, there's a wolf, ram,
Yes.
and heart during Thor's vision of what Asgard could be. So like that, I almost feel like kind of fits with the
Definitely.
Whedonverse theory.
100% chance that was put in as a nod to Wolfman. There is no doubt in my mind that, especially when you consider that scene, he was forced to add that. So when we started, he was like, well, you know what, I'm going to give you your stupid scene, but I'm going to stick a wolf, ram, and heart in there because I'm still directing this thing.
So with the Nevers, what's really interesting about that, the way Joss has described it, and I'm not going to say it word for word, but something about how, oh yeah, so Joss has described it as an epic science fiction drama about a gang of Victorian women who find themselves with unusual abilities, relentless enemies, and a mission that might change the world. So that whole might change the world, it's interesting.
The fact that he highlights that these are unusual powers, like maybe these guys are like the progenitors, or these ladies are kind of the first wave that will then lead to other things. Because I was thinking, Wolfram Hart was meant to be founded slightly before the Victorian era, wasn't it? It was kind of late 1700s, whereas the Victorian era was more kind of late 1800s. So it's not impossible that we could see a kind of early version of them, or some kind of we can see there's going to be some kind of dark organization involved, some seedy English underbelly type. Of course, the question then becomes, if this is what we're expecting to happen, is Joss going to expect that we expect that and then try and throw us off? Because he is aware of this theory's existence, would he then really try? Because this is his first series in a while. It's his first series with HBO. It's his first series set that far back. Could it be possible that he's doing all of this specifically to distance this work from his previous creations? I was actually planning to expand slightly upon the sort of bare bones skeleton that I've given here in an article for our website. So if any listeners want to read it more and even discuss their thoughts on how the Nevers could connect, you will be able to find that all on the website, hbothenevers.com. Feels like a solid place to end topic 3 and move on to our fourth and final topic for the evening, directing duties. Former Game of Thrones and now The Nevers executive producer Bernadette Caulfield has brought several of her Game of Thrones colleagues over to work on The Nevers, most notably producer Duncan McGough and production designer Gemma Jackson. If Joss is not the sole director for season 1 of The Nevers, might we see directors from Game of Thrones come over and direct an episode or two? Miguel Sapochnik, perhaps? Do we think there's any chance? Do we think he's going to try and take it all on himself, or will he outsource the work?
That's actually a really great question. Here's the thing for Joss Whedon and directing and me. I think he's a very underrated director because I guess he's known so well for being a writer that people forget that he doesn't have to be as good of a director. And obviously when you direct something that you write, it's a little easier because you know exactly what you want from that specific line. However, I think the body from Buffy the Vampire Slayer season 5 is like one of the best directed things I've ever seen.
Well, I think it's perfectly summed up by everyone's favourite episode, Hush,
Yes.
which he wrote out of spite because someone had accused him of only being able to write dialogue. So he wrote a whole episode without any dialogue. And in that episode, the directing was superb. And it goes to show that even if you strip away what you believe to be his strengths, he still absolutely nails it.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing if Joss is going to direct all of it. I personally think he won't, just because it's not too many episodes, but just because there's more than a few. I feel like if it was just a mini series with like 3 episodes or something, he definitely would, but I think it's a lot of work to do 10.
I totally agree. I mean, if you look at modern TV series, you almost never have one person directing an entire season. The only show I can think of just off the top of my head that has a single director for a whole show is Mr. Robot. And I think if anyone would tell you not to have a single director for a whole season, it would be Sam Esmail, director of Mr. Robot, because he's gone on record as saying it is draining. I have a distinct suspicion that Joss will probably write and direct the first 2 and probably the last 2, maybe 3, and then leave the body of the series for other people.
Yeah, and there's just this magic, obviously, when Joss writes a script and directs it, again, like I mentioned earlier, you just know you're in for an amazing ride. So the more he can direct, the better. I personally would also love if somehow he brought back some of the Buffy and Angel directors.
I think he's got a talent for finding other writers and directors that really understand his work and what he's trying to do. And so that he knows that when he leaves it in their hands, we're going to get consistent quality.
I personally would love some of the Buffy directors that have directed a lot of episodes are like James A. Contner, David Solomon, David Grossman.
I would definitely be behind that. I have a distinct suspicion that Joss will be taking on that somewhat nebulous title that has become oddly important of late, which is showrunner. You see that quite a lot. It's weird. What I've always thought was quite odd. Everyone talks about, who's the new showrunner for whatever show, and they put a lot of weight behind it, but it's not in the credits. True, it'll often be the creator or the director that's the showrunner, but quite often it isn't. A perfect example of this, and of how a good showrunner can either make or break a series, would be the last few seasons of Doctor Who.
Yeah, totally.
Where we had, love him or hate him, Stephen Moffat was in charge for a very long time, and he really set the tone for his whole era. And I have a distinct suspicion Joss would do something quite similar. He may not write or direct, but even when he's not credited as writing, I have a feeling he'll still have last say on all the scripts. And even when he's not credited as directing, I wouldn't be surprised if he was on set, just keeping an eye over the director's shoulder, just maybe move do something a little, just do it this way, please, and then letting him do the rest of the work themselves.
Yeah, I don't see him not always being on set, pretty much, for the most part. Obviously, he'll probably be busy while other directors potentially direct episodes. He might be busy looking at editing or doing pre-production for maybe the 2 last episodes he might do. So obviously he won't be there 24/7, but like you said, in Buffy and Angel, even when he isn't credited as directing or writing, he was there on set. So
because really the only connection between those 2 series is the network they're on. They have very, very different styles in basically every way that matters. But that said, I wouldn't be surprised if we did see a few names that we're familiar with kind of reoccur in the casting. People like what was his name? The guy that did Battle of the Bast. Oh, I feel Canadian now. Miguel Sapochnik, who was mentioned in the intro text. I wouldn't be surprised if we see his name crop up, because he is a very, very talented director. And when he's good at, he's good at doing kind of the large scale action scenes. So I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he joined in if they decide to go kind of epic with the action scenes. I wouldn't be surprised if they drafted in directors like him for those episodes.
And again, it's interesting. I haven't again seen a lot of the later parts of Game of Thrones, so there might be amazing directors that Game of Thrones had. I just hope if they do bring on Game of Thrones directors for the Nevers, I hope they understand Joss's style.
I think there is definitely something to be said for kind of picking the right person for the message you want to convey in that episode. If you're going for a larger action type episode, bring in someone that you know is good at handling those kind of scenes. If you're doing a smaller, more character driven episode, bring along someone that you know can film those kind of intimate scenes without overwhelming the mood of the episode. We have an email from D-Man here. If that is your real name, that's awesome. If it's a pretend name, it's still awesome. Oh, and it's actually it's a quite related question. IMDb lists a ton of former Game of Thrones behind the scenes people, producers, art department, etc. Should I take this as a vote of confidence from HBO? That is a solid question. And actually, there's 2 ways we can think about this. What are your opinions on that?
I feel like with studios, if someone does a great job from a project that they've done and it's like success that has already happened, then there is no reason why they wouldn't want those people to work on something that they do trust is going to be great, because if it's worked before, it'll work again. So I personally think it is a vote of confidence from HBO. And that's actually really exciting because, again, if they trust these people that have worked on this show before, they know how to communicate to make it be the best possible thing it can be, at least when it comes to behind the scenes.
While I do think this is a show of confidence, they're bringing their A game because they really want this to succeed. You could also, if you chose, view it as they're a little unsure of whether it's the concept of the show, or they're a little unsure about some part of it. So they're bringing in a lot of, producers, art department, directors, writers, etc., that they know are good, just to try and smooth out the variables, so to speak. If they know that they've got good production, good art, good directors, that just lessens the chances of a catastrophic failure, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point, and that's definitely another way to look at it. It's so fascinating because we'll never really know.
Honestly, I don't think that's why they're doing it.
Right.
But I had that thought when I was looking at this question. I was thinking, like, is it a vote of confidence?
Right.
I think it is, but you could quite easily view it as HBO kind of hedging their bets, just to make sure that there's some things they know might go wrong. They want to make sure that there's at least as many things that they know definitely won't go wrong.
Really great question, D-Man.
Yeah, he is the man. Could be a lady, suppose. Yeah. Then Jamarco Martin emailed in, will the show have a black superhero? Short but important question. What are your thoughts?
Wonderful question. So I am a Latina, so diversity is incredibly important for me. I definitely think Hollywood has made strides, but not enough. And I would love a black superhero. I will be sad if there isn't one. I don't think there's any more excuses for there not to be every type of representation. And I definitely think Joss cares about that. I totally understand in his previous shows, like there definitely could have been more, 100%. But I think especially now, it's the time to do that because there's no more excuses. And I think he does care about that. I mean, his writing team, which I would also love for this to be a topic because he posted a photo. His writing team seems diverse. I believe there's a black woman, there's an Asian man, there's obviously other female writers. So if he's already looking at it through behind the scenes, I definitely think his main cast will be diverse as well. That's my opinion.
No, I think that's a very good opinion. And I'd have to say, when you make these kind of historical era specific shows, like for instance, a lot of people complained that Game of Thrones was super white, and it was. But it was based around kind of the War of the Roses, and at that time, it was based on like it's an English themed show, and at the time, maybe there wasn't the diversity there is now, so they've got that excuse. However, this particular show is set during Victorian era Britain, and that excuse goes absolutely out the window. At that time, Britain, in our more acquisitive, angry, conquery days that they were, we'd already taken over Australia, New Zealand, America, obviously South America, parts of Africa, parts of Asia, India. We had people all over the globe. And on the flip side of that, people from all over the globe were coming to Britain. That was really the start of Britain's multiculturalism. There's literally no reason not to have a fully diverse cast in this show. It would be historically accurate to have one, and in fact would be inaccurate not to. So I'd have to assume there's going to be a variety of colours. There'll probably be LGBTQ plus members of the team.
Which would be amazing.
It really would. And I was thinking the other day, it would be pretty cool to have one of the Nevers, or maybe one of their kind of supporting cast, to be missing a limb, and it to be an actual actor or actress that is actually missing a limb.
Yes.
And then have like probably the CGI. They have like a sort of steampunky copper prosthetic. How cool would that be?
That would be amazing.
Like imagine kind of an Iron Man-esque adaptive robotic arm.
Now I'm going to be so sad if that doesn't happen.
I know, I slightly ruined it for myself when I had that idea. Joss, if you're listening, that one's a freebie. Take it. I don't even care. I'll just be happy that it's in the show.
And I would also love actors from the deaf community and the blind community to be a part of it too. Because, yes, I very much care about historical accuracy. That's personally a thing I write the most, are like biopics or things set in the past. However, I feel like the second you start introducing science fiction or fantastical elements, even if things are based off things, I personally don't see that as an excuse to not have a diverse cast. So the second it's a science fiction epic drama, like you could do whatever you want. There could be aliens, right? So if there could be aliens, if there could be anything, you could create anything, something new that's not even an alien, it's something else, like then we should be able to have all types of diversity.
One thing I would say, if they do include a blind character, please, can we not get another Daredevil-esque martial arts master who overcomes their blindness by using their other senses?
Yes.
It's been done literally a billion times. Please be more creative. And then just go in the complete opposite direction, something he's done before that was cool that I want to see him do again, would be his much maligned Alien Resurrection, which I thought was fantastic and everyone else seemed to hate. In that, there was a character thing is, I first saw it and thought, that's not an alien film. It's very different. Then I found out Joss Whedon had written it. And I was like, oh yeah, it's a Joss Whedon alien film. Now everything makes sense. I should have known. Everyone was quipping. Ridley becomes a superhero. And there's a guy in a wheelchair who, he drives everywhere. And at one point, he just starts taking bits off his wheelchair and just constructs them into a shotgun. And kind of 14, 15-year-old me saw that and was like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Yes.
I would quite like him to do something along those lines, have sort of a person in a wheelchair that's kind of, but it's a very technologically advanced, again, I'm going to bring the word up again because it's my favorite thing, a sort of steampunk creation, like, maybe sort of walks along on spider legs instead of wheels, or it's a self-propelled wheelchair with miniguns on it. Just let your imagination run wild. It can happen.
And I think even the exciting part, let's say we start watching the show and it doesn't have any of these things that we want. If the show continues into season 2, like, it could always happen.
Yeah. And so one thing we have to remember, like, yes, this is an HBO series. They have very deep pockets, but they're not infinite.
Right.
There's a reason that there wasn't much ghost in the last seasons of Game of Thrones, because they needed the budget for the dragons. So, I mean, while it would be cool to have, a steampunk prosthetic or a wheelchair with legs, we have to remember, if that's going to be a character that's in the show every episode, they can't be spending 75% of their budget just to animate the wheelchair.
Right.
So it's great to theorize these things, but they're probably not going to actually make it into the show. Excellent question. We got a bit off topic there, but I think we answered his question, so it's all good. Yeah. Oh, look who's back. It's Berger Bowie again, or Bowie if you're nasty. He's back again, and he would like to know, another great question. He's good. Joss is returning to TV with his own IP. While many of us love Firefly and Dollhouse, he hasn't had a real TV hit since Angel. His reputation as a filmmaker and as a private person has gone downhill lately. What I mean is, I think this show will either make him relevant again, or it could potentially ruin his reputation permanently. I'm really hopeful for the show to be good, but you never know. That is a great and quite cutting question. Thank you very much for that, Berger.
Oh man, another one I could probably spend 6 hours.
Yeah.
I kind of hit this a little bit earlier when I was talking about Joss and his San Diego Comic-Con panels and how he looked a little defeated, literally apologizing to the entire 6,000 person room about Age of Ultron. And he had to leave Twitter, and then now he's back on Twitter, which is a good sign in my opinion for his mental health. However, there's still the occasional person that brings up certain things about him. And again, I still feel like some of the modern audience, they haven't seen his work. They could have a negative opinion about him without really knowing too much of his stuff. So what I'm kind of scared about is if there's even a line in the Nevers, even one line that is like, potentially you could misconstrue it to be anti-feminist or anything of that sort, I just feel like people on social media will like freak out. And that wouldn't be the best thing for him, right? Or for anyone really. So yeah, that is that fear that I have about that. Because it could go south real quickly. That's what happened with Age of Ultron. I personally think some people didn't understand Black Widow's line about her being a monster. And that again, won't go into that, but I'm scared about that.
Yeah, I think that is the absolute last subject I should be discussing, so I'm going to leave that off to the left over there. You can discuss that some other time when I am not in the conversation. But I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
But no, yeah. But he's not coming into this series as strong as he would have been if this were released maybe 5 or 10 years back. But I think, like we discussed earlier, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because what that means is that expectations going in are going to be quite low. So fingers crossed. So if people go in not expecting it to be super amazing, when it is, they'll be pleasantly surprised. But I think one thing you said, which is quite sadly accurate these days and really needs to go away, is he can make 10 hours of amazing drama full of strong characters of all genders, of all inclinations and origins, and they can all have their moment to shine. They can all have great deep arcs, and then there can be one line, one 10-second line, 5 minutes before the series ends, that can be construed as marginally potentially problematic, and Twitter will laser focus on that one line, and they will not let it go, and they will campaign, and they'll get the show cancelled, and they'll get Joss strung up, and they'll get HBO burnt to the ground.
Right.
And yeah, like, I think there's always a chance, but I'm hoping he now in it's 2019. We're very aware that if you say something that can be construed as problematic, you will be kind of attacked for it. So I'm hoping that they will kind of make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, like, it's tough because I always go back and forth. One side of it is it's amazing that people are calling things out, because without doing that, I don't think change could happen as quickly. But at the same time, sometimes things are misconstrued, or the way people attack someone on social media is just wrong. Like, they shouldn't be saying the things they're saying. So it's this weird, like, we had to find some middle ground, because it's very important to get our point across, but we can't vilify someone just because, like we said, like, one line is wrong. However, I think with his writing team, I think with the HBO producers, I hope they'll learn from some of the mistakes that Game of Thrones had in that sense. You would hope with so many people working on it that they'll be able to call each other out if anything like that happens. That's my hope.
Yeah, I think that is one of the benefits to having a broad spectrum of people in your writer's room. They say nothing great was ever created by committee. And while I do tend to believe there is some validity to that claim, it is always great to have different voices when you're building something, because you need that variety. Otherwise, you can get into a very specific way of thinking, and you'll think you're doing amazing, but actually you're doing amazing for a small group, and then the other 90% of the populace think you're a moron. And we can't have that these days.
Yeah. In my opinion, that's what happened to Series 4 of the BBC Sherlock. It was just Mark Gatiss and Stephen Moffat, and they usually have Steve Thompson as a third writer. But I feel like without Steve Thompson, it was just Mark Gatiss and Stephen Moffat just kind of going crazy and doing whatever they wanted without someone else's opinion kind of pinning them down back to reality. And that's a little different, because at least Sherlock wasn't problematic per se. It was just, in my opinion, not as good
Terrible.
as it. Yeah, honestly, horrible. So
It was so bad.
it was. I can't even talk about how sad and mad I still am, and that's a whole other topic. But in that same vein, it is good to have other people to, like, rein you down or kind of check you to make sure that you're doing your best work and you don't do anything problematic.
So fingers crossed that this will be his entrance into the great pantheon. Thank you for that one, Berger. That was a really excellent question. And I think we may have to revisit that subject again in the future, because there is a lot to say. And then the last question today is from D-Man again. So he just couldn't stay away. They couldn't stay away. Okay, Whedon once said he had several seasons of Firefly planned from the beginning. Do you think he's planned that much ahead for the Nevers? Ooh, that's a good one. Do you have any thoughts on that, Gina?
I would assume he does, only because it's him, but also because, I don't know why I keep coming back to this, but there's something about him having that comic book called Twist already potentially probably being written, like, already. Like, they premiered a cover of that comic at Comic-Con and everyone was so happy and freaking out. So I feel like Joss has had the idea for this TV show for a while, and it only helps you plan things out for a season if you do have future things ahead. And usually when you go into meetings with studios and networks, that is a question they ask. sometimes I hate this question because it's really difficult, but sometimes they would ask something like, okay, 3 seasons from now, episode 5, what do you think an episode idea would be? And
Oh,
that's
wow.
really difficult. Yeah, it's impossible, right? But I feel like if you know your show, if you at least have a general outline, you could kind of on the spot think of a potential storyline. So almost by default, I feel like he has to have things planned.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if they went into the pitch meeting and they're like, all right, season 3, episode 5, what happens? Okay, picture this. Fade to black. First scene. Sweeping camera. And like he just lists off the whole
Oh,
script for the
totally.
episode just because, fuck you, I'm Joss Whedon.
Literally.
And knowing him, if he did pitch that episode 3 years down the line, when it came time to record season 3, episode 5, a few of the ideas would actually have snuck in. This actually is a great question because it is a subject I've got a bit of a bee in my bonnet about. I watch a lot of TV because I don't like going outside. And one thing that really annoys me, and I won't name drop any shows because I don't want to sandbag anyone. One thing that really annoys me a lot, and especially with TV from America, is you'll have these shows, and because there's always this fear that this season could be your last season, and quite often is, no one ever wants to really get invested and really start laying the groundwork for a multi-season arc, because for all they know, they'll get 2/3 of the way through it and then be cancelled and there'll never be a payoff. So no one wants to take the time to really build these plots because there's no point. You've got to make sure that each season has a definite beginning, middle, and end, and maybe you can include like a 2-minute stinger right at the end of the finale just to make sure that people come back for that next season, the first episode. But there's no point building any real continuity because it can all be taken away in a second. It's like one of my favorite shows of recent years, the second time this show I'm mentioning it, is Mr. Robot. And they did something really, really clever. They were picked up for 2 further seasons, just off the strength of the pilot. And season 2, when I first watched it, I was actually a little disappointed because it didn't there wasn't really your typical season arc. There was a beginning, middle, and end, but the beginning was mostly dealing with season 1, and the end was mostly setting up season 3. So it felt a little unsatisfying. But then you get season 3, and it was amazing, and you realise the only reason it could be that amazing is because all the setup for it was done in season 2. They could hit the ground running with season 1 because all the groundwork was already laid. And the reason it was so sort of strange to me when I was watching it was because people are now so used to the very kind of delineated season arcs that you get these days because there is no greater continuity. But actually, when it pays off like this, it's stupendous. So I'm really hoping he knows he's not guaranteed anything, but I'm really, really hoping that he's done some background deals. Like, look, please just guarantee me at least like 2, maybe 3 seasons. I've got an arc planned. This is what I'm going to do. It's going to be amazing. It's going to make you billions. It's going to be bigger than anything you've had before. Just let me tell this arc and we're good. So I'm really hoping he's got at least kind of 3 seasons planned. And I'm really hoping that HBO give him the chance to tell that story.
That is such an amazing point that I've never thought of because I personally don't watch a lot of TV still because Buffy ruined television for me because nothing's half as good. But I love that point that you made about how American television tries to not have a multi-season arc. However, knowing Joss, the famed season 5 of Buffy, where that could have potentially been the end, I feel like he creates such amazing characters that even if in this first season it feels like it's the end of a first season, something will happen where you'll want to see the reactions of the characters and you have so many potential storylines in your head. So kind of like season 5 of Buffy. Sorry if you guys haven't watched it, spoiler alert. Buffy dies and that shot of all of them reacting, right? If Buffy ended there, it would have been great. But you see how it's character work. It's almost like a character cliffhanger in a way that you just want to see everyone's reactions and like how they're going to build their life without Buffy. So season 5 works great on its own, but you could also have another season, and I hope Joss does that as well. Like, fine, make season 1 its own story, but build enough seeds, especially with the characters, that you'd want more. And I personally think he's really good at that because he hates cliffhangers. So, so that's my hope, is that it'll be so character driven and the characters will be so good that in a way it will still feel like a multi-season arc.
I had heard, I don't know if this is true or not, but I'd heard that actually Joss wanted to end the series after 5, and it was the network that convinced him to write more. I remember when I first saw the finale for season 5, there was the previously on Buffy, and it started right from season 1, episode 1, did a real flash of all of Buffy. So I think he was definitely debating finishing it there, but if he had, we never would have got one of the greatest TV episodes of all time. Once more with feeling. That was another excellent question from D-Man there. If any of you out there listening have more questions, feel free. We can be contacted through all the usual places: Twitter, email, Facebook, at the HBO The Nevers. We will try and answer all your questions each episode, but if we get too many, we will add them to future episodes. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you, Gina, for rambling with me today.
Of course.
I don't have social media because outside people scare me, but I believe you do.
Yes, very understandably so. So my Twitter is Gina Gemini. Gemini is spelled with Gemeni, an E in the middle. And feel free to follow me. I will definitely be tweeting about Star Wars, figure skating, and anything Joss Whedon. So if any of that interests you, feel free to follow me. And I will obviously be talking about this podcast as well.
If you enjoy our nonsensical ramblings, please feel free to subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. And please rate all the episodes that we put out so the world can know how great we are. I am Taheg, and we will see you again next week for the Nevers Podcast. Have you seen Yuri on Ice?
Yes, oh my god. Another one of my obsessions.
I knew you would. The Nevers Podcast is not endorsed by Mutant Enemy, Warner Media Entertainment, or any of its subsidiaries, including HBO Home Box Office, and is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. The Nevers and all names, pictures, and audio clips are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of their respective copyright holders.